of research, innovation, and relentless work, all to be relegated to serving tea and taking notes. I felt heat rising to my cheeks but kept my expression neutral. Around us, male colleagues adjusted their ties and rehearsed their opening lines. Not one of them had actually written the proposal that would be presented today. The Saudi delegation expects a certain professional atmosphere, Landon continued, glancing meaningfully at my hijab. We need to present our best face. I straightened my jacket. We'll see. His patronizing smile didn't waver. Please make sure there's enough water for everyone. And Aliyah, he lowered his voice. Try not to speak unless spoken to. The delegation entered. Landon stepped forward with an eager smile. The distinguished lead visitor scanned the room, his brow furrowing in confusion. Where is Vice Minister Aliyah? He asked. Every head turned. The air in the room changed instantly. Landon stammered. I don't believe... I stepped forward. Your Excellency, welcome to Chicago. The room froze in disbelief as the Sheikh took my hand warmly in both of his. The architect of innovation herself, he said with a genuine smile. Our ministry has been most impressed with your vision. If you're still with me, I want you to know this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about justice, about reclaiming what's yours when the world tells you that you don't belong. If you've ever been underestimated, stay with me until the end. You'll want to hear what happens next. My name is Aliyah Nazari, and until that moment, I was just another invisible woman in a company that collected our talents while minimizing our existence. I had joined Emerald Energy Solutions fresh from graduate school, with dual engineering degrees from MIT and fluency in Arabic, Farsi, and English. My father had been an engineering professor before our family fled Iran during the revolution. Education wasn't just encouraged in our home, it was reverence. I still remember my first week at Emerald. I sat in a meeting where I presented my ideas for improving solar panel efficiency. 2 days later, I heard Connor, a man who'd been hired the same day as me, praised for his innovative approach, which was word for word what I had suggested. When I mentioned this to my team leader, he said I must have misremembered. I didn't. This pattern repeated for years. My project succeeded while credit went to others. My recommendations were ignored until voiced by male colleagues. I was passed over for promotions that went to men I had trained. Each time, there was a reason. Not enough experience. Not assertive enough. Not quite ready. Meanwhile, Landon rose to division head with alarming speed. He had a gift, not for innovation, but for claiming ownership of other people's work, particularly women's work. He collected our ideas like trophies and displayed them as his own. The breaking point came 3 years into my time at Emerald. I had developed a radical new approach to solar implementation that could reduce costs by 35%. When I presented it to Landon, he dismissed it as unrealistic and too ambitious. 1 month later, he unveiled the exact same proposal to the board, with his name on it. That night, I went home and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me had dark circles under her eyes and a defeated posture. Is this who you are now? I asked myself. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind. She had cleaned offices at night to fund my mother's education, who then became a doctor and supported mine. Your knowledge is the one thing no one can take from you, she always said. The next day, I made a decision that would change everything. I volunteered for a cultural exchange program our company had with several Middle Eastern countries. My language skills and technical knowledge opened doors to diplomatic circles that were typically closed to outsiders. Evenings and weekends, I translated technical documents and facilitated discussions between officials. No one at work knew. They never asked about my life, assuming I had none beyond serving their ambitions. You're different from the others at your company, Sheikh told me one evening after a particularly productive session where I'd helped navigate a complex technical impasse. You understand both the science and the cultural nuances, that's rare. Gradually, I built a reputation among international energy ministers and officials. My expertise was recognized and respected. 6 months before the fateful meeting with Landon, I received a call from the Foreign Ministry. We would like to appoint you as Vice Minister for International Energy Cooperation, the official said. You would serve as our representative in key negotiations while maintaining your position at Emerald. I accepted immediately. The irony was exquisite. At Emerald, I was still asked to order lunch and take notes in meetings where men explained my own research to me. In diplomatic circles, I was addressed as vice minister and consulted on billion-dollar decisions. I kept my dual roles separate, not out of deception but necessity. I had learned that Emerald would never recognize my value unless forced to do so. The opportunity would come. I just needed to be patient. Which brings us back to that moment in the conference room, when Sheikh Tariq asked for me by name, and everything changed. The Sheikh smiled at me. Your innovative approach to solar implementation impressed our ministry greatly. Landon attempted recovery, his face a study in controlled panic. She assists with our projects, but I lead this initiative. Strange, said Sheikh Tariq, tilting his head slightly. Our government has been working directly with the vice minister for months. In fact, the proposal we're discussing today bears her signature. The room fell silent as every eye turned to me. The men who had ignored and dismissed me for years now stared in confusion and disbelief. I felt a lifetime of underestimation, culminating in this perfect moment of reckoning. But this was just the beginning. Once the meeting concluded, with the Sheikh making it clear he would only deal with me, Landon pulled me into a side room, his face contorted with rage. You've been operating behind the company's back? Working with foreign governments without authorization? You're terminated, effective immediately. I remained calm, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from my sleeve. That would be unwise. Excuse me? This would be your largest contract ever. 300 million in the first phase alone. The delegation will only work with me. His face reddened. What do you want? A promotion? Money? Tell me what this little stunt is about. I want change. Real structural change. Women-led teams. Equal pay transparency. And something else. What? He snapped. The company will establish a foundation for girls in engineering, with full scholarships, named after my grandmother who cleaned offices at night to fund my mother's education. He scoffed. Ridiculous. The board would never. Then I'll take Sheikh Tariq and his delegation to your competitors. By tomorrow. I watched him calculate the losses. Hundreds of millions in immediate contracts. Billions in potential future deals. His jaw worked silently. You're bluffing, he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. I took out my phone. Shall I call the Sheikh now and let him know Emerald isn't interested? I believe Horizon Energy would be very receptive. Have you ever seen someone realize they've lost all power in a situation they thought they controlled? It's a fascinating transformation to witness. First comes disbelief, then anger, followed by the desperate scramble to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage. Landon went through all these stages in the span of 30 seconds. His face, so accustomed to wearing superiority like a comfortable mask, crumpled into uncertainty. The board will need to approve any changes, he said weakly. I'm sure you'll find a way to convince them. You've always been so persuasive with my ideas before. He flinched at that. Direct hit. You could have just told me about your position, he said, attempting to reframe the narrative. We could have worked together. Like we worked together on my solar implementation proposal? The one you called unrealistic until you presented it as your own? His eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected me to bring that up so directly. That was a misunderstanding, he said, his voice hollow. No, it was theft. But now, we have an opportunity to create something better. I handed him a document I'd prepared in advance, outlining the changes I wanted implemented. He took it wordlessly, his fingers trembling slightly. You have until tomorrow morning to get board approval, I said, turning to leave. The Sheikh expects an answer by noon. And if I refuse? A last, desperate attempt to assert control. I paused at the door and looked back at him. Then I'll build something better elsewhere, and you'll spend the rest of your career watching me succeed. As I walked out, I felt lighter than I had in years. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, not just for me, but for every woman who had been silenced, overlooked, and underestimated. The next 24 hours were transformative. Emergency board meetings, frantic calls, negotiations that stretched into the night. I watched from the periphery as Landon fought for his survival, suddenly championing the very causes he had dismissed for years. 1 week later, a press release announced our historic partnership with Saudi investors, the new scholarship foundation for women in engineering, and my elevation to the executive team as Chief Innovation Officer. Landon remained in his position. I hadn't wanted him removed. That would have been too easy, too clean. No, my revenge wasn't destroying him. It was creating space for every woman coming after me, while he watched his world transform before his eyes. In our first executive meeting, he tried his old tactics, interrupting a female product manager named Imani. "I think what she's trying to say is," he began. "I'd like to hear Imani finish," I said, my voice pleasant but firm. The room fell silent, and Imani continued, her brilliant analysis receiving the attention it deserved. When Landon attempted to take credit for another team's work, I redirected. That originated with Zoya's team. "Zoya, would you like to elaborate on your findings?" Each time I saw recognition dawn in the eyes of the women around the table. They sat straighter, spoke more confidently, stopped apologizing before offering opinions. And the most beautiful part? The change was contagious. Women who had been silenced for years found their voices. Men who had been quietly uncomfortable with the old system but unwilling to challenge it now had permission to be allies. The culture shifted, not overnight, but steadily, persistently. Sheikh Tarek became a powerful advocate for our partnership. During his next visit, he brought his daughter, a brilliant young woman studying renewable engineering. After our meeting, she pulled me aside. "My father told me what you did," she said, her eyes bright with admiration. "How you changed an entire company from within." "Sometimes all it takes is refusing to be invisible," I replied. "In my country, many women still struggle to be seen. Your story gives me hope." That night, I stood on my apartment balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline. The lights of the city sparkled against the darkness, thousands of tiny illuminations pushing back against the night. I thought about how change happens, not always in dramatic revolutions, but often in quiet refusals to accept the unacceptable. But not everyone welcomed this new world we were building. 3 months after my promotion, I discovered that someone had been altering my technical reports before they reached our international partners. Small changes, numbers adjusted, projections modified, subtle enough to be dismissed as miscommunications, but significant enough to undermine my credibility over time. At first, I suspected Landon. It would be just like him to sabotage me quietly. But when I traced the digital trail, it led not to him, but to Preston, Landon's most loyal director. "You should have stayed in your lane," Preston hissed when I confronted him privately. "You think you're so special because you speak a few languages? This company was running fine before you decided to play social justice warrior. This company was hemorrhaging female talent and missing opportunities," I corrected him. "And now you're falsifying reports. That's grounds for termination." "It's your word against mine," he smirked. "And I've been here a lot longer than you. Who do you think the board will believe?" "Neither of us," I replied calmly. "They'll believe the evidence." His smirk faltered. "What evidence?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked away, leaving him to wonder exactly what I knew and how I knew it. Let him sweat. The truth was, I'd been documenting everything since my earliest days at Emerald. Every stolen idea, every dismissal, every microaggression. It had started as self-protection, a way to maintain my sanity when I was constantly told that my perceptions were wrong. Now, that documentation was power. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. "Back off or regret it." I should have been frightened. Instead, I felt a cold clarity. They still didn't understand who they were dealing with. I had survived exile and reconstruction of my entire life as a child. I had withstood years of professional erosion without breaking. Did they really think a text message would make me cower? The next morning, I walked into the office and headed straight to the HR director's office. Vivian looked up, surprised to see me. "Aaliyah, what can I do for you?" I placed a flash drive on her desk. "I need to show you something." For the next hour, I walked her through the evidence I'd compiled against Preston. The original reports, the altered versions, the digital forensics proving he had made the changes. This is disturbing, Vivian said, her expression grave. But why would he do this? Because some people would rather sabotage success than adapt to change. By that afternoon, Preston was escorted from the building. The system that had protected men like him for so long was beginning to crumble. That night, another text message. "You'll pay for this." I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Vivian and our legal team, then blocked the number. I refused to be intimidated, but I wasn't naive. Cornered people can be dangerous. The next week brought our quarterly board meeting. As I prepared my presentation on our international initiatives, I felt a familiar tension in the air. Something was coming. When I entered the boardroom, Landon was already there, huddled with several board members. They fell silent as I approached. Bad sign. "Alia," Chairman Griffith said, his tone overly formal. "Before you begin your presentation, there's a matter we need to discuss." I set down my materials. "Yes?" "It's come to our attention that there may be a conflict of interest in your dual roles as our executive and as a foreign ministry representative." So that was their angle. Not falsified reports, but my integrity. I disclosed my appointment as vice minister during my promotion negotiations. I said calmly, "It's documented in my employment contract addendum, which legal approved." Landon leaned forward. "The concern isn't disclosure, but divided loyalties. How can we be sure you're representing Emerald's interests first?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I looked around the room, noting who seemed uncomfortable with this line of questioning and who seemed eager to see me stumble. "My dual position is precisely why the Sheikh chose to work with Emerald," I replied. "It's why we secured the largest contract in company history. It's why our international business has grown 42% in 3 months." "Numbers can be misleading," Landon countered. "We need to be certain you're not compromising company interests." I took a slow, deliberate breath. This attack had Landon's fingerprints all over it. He couldn't challenge my results, so he was questioning my loyalty, playing on xenophobic undertones without being explicitly discriminatory. "I find the timing of these concerns interesting," I said. "They arise immediately after I exposed Preston for falsifying reports. Reports that, if they had gone undetected, would have damaged our relationship with Saudi investors and cost this company millions." Chairman Griffith shifted uncomfortably. "We're not suggesting any connection. Aren't you?" I interrupted. "Because it seems like every time a woman in this company succeeds or exposes misconduct, her character comes under attack." The room fell silent. I hadn't raised my voice, but my words landed with precision. "I have always acted with integrity," I continued. "My work speaks for itself, but if the board feels my dual roles are problematic, I'm prepared to make a choice today." Landon couldn't hide his smile. He thought he had me cornered. "And what choice would that be?" Chairman Griffith asked. "I can resign from Emerald and take my relationships with international partners with me. The Sheikh has already made it clear he works with me, not with the company." The smile vanished from Landon's face. "Or," I continued, "we can recognize that my unique position is an asset to Emerald, not a liability. That diversity of perspective and international connections are strengths in a global market." I paused, looking each board member in the eye. "The choice is yours, but I suggest you consider what serves this company best, progress or regression." The tension in the room was palpable. Chairman Griffith cleared his throat. "Perhaps we've been hasty in raising these concerns. Your results have been excellent, Aaliyah. Let's table this discussion and move on to your presentation." I nodded and began setting up my materials, acutely aware of Landon's glare from across the table. He had miscalculated, thinking the board would automatically side with him over me. He didn't understand that power dynamics had shifted. Results spoke louder than old loyalties now. As I presented our international growth numbers, I watched realization dawn on the board members' faces. The strategy was working. We were expanding into markets that had previously been closed to us. Innovation was accelerating. Profits were rising. After the meeting, Chairman Griffith pulled me aside. "That was an impressive presentation." "Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "I want you to know that not everyone on the board supported Landon's concerns. Some of us recognize the value you bring." I smiled politely. Actions speak louder than words, Chairman. I'll be watching to see who truly supports progress at Emerald. Walking back to my office, I passed Landon in the hallway. He didn't meet my eyes. Good. Let him stew in his failure. But I knew this wasn't over. He was too invested in the old power structure to surrender without a fight, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. That preparation came in the form of Delia, a former colleague who had left Emerald 2 years earlier after being passed over for promotion in favor of a less qualified man. She now worked at the Chicago Tribune as an investigative reporter focusing on corporate culture. We met for coffee at a small shop far from the office. "So," she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries, "you wanted to talk about Emerald?" "I wanted to talk about accountability," I corrected. "About what happens when companies promise change but don't follow through." Her eyes lit up with interest. "Are you saying Emerald's recent diversity initiatives are just for show?" "I'm saying progress is fragile. Some people are actively trying to undermine it, and I need insurance." "What kind of insurance?" I slid a folder across the table. "Everything in here is documented and verified. I'm not asking you to publish it now. But if things go sideways, I want someone outside the company to have this information." Delia opened the folder and skimmed its contents, her eyes widening. "This is explosive, systemic discrimination, falsified reports, retaliatory actions. You've been building this case for years." "Since my first month at Emerald," I confirmed. "I hoped I'd never need to use it." She looked up at me. "And now?" "Now I'm not so sure. Things are changing, but change brings resistance. I need to protect what we've built." Delia nodded slowly, understanding exactly what I was asking. "I'll keep this safe. If you ever give the word, I'll make sure the whole story comes out." "Thank you." As I walked back to the office, I felt both relief and sadness. I didn't want to expose Emerald's dirty laundry to the world. Despite everything, I believed in the company's potential. But I also knew that real change sometimes requires the threat of consequences. The weeks that followed were deceptively quiet. Landon maintained a professional distance, speaking to me only when necessary. Preston had disappeared, his social media accounts gone dark. The Scholarship Foundation for Women in Engineering was gaining momentum, with applications pouring in from talented girls across the country. On the surface, everything was going according to plan, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the calm. That feeling was confirmed when Imani, the product manager I had supported in the executive meeting, asked to speak with me privately. "There's something you should know," she said, closing my office door behind her. "Landon has been meeting with board members individually, off-site, unofficial meetings." "Do you know what they're discussing?" She hesitated. "Not exactly, but Janine from his administrative team overheard him on the phone. He said something about conflict of interest and foreign influence concerns." My stomach tightened. He was trying to build a coalition against me. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Keep your ears open, but be careful. I don't want anyone else targeted." After she left, I stared out my window at the Chicago skyline. The afternoon sun glinted off glass and steel, transforming the city into a landscape of light and shadow. I had come so far, created so much change. I couldn't let Landon destroy it all because his ego couldn't handle a new world order. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Sheikh Tarek. "Vice Minister," he greeted me, his voice unusually grave. "I've received some concerning information about Emerald Energy that I wanted to discuss with you directly." "What kind of information?" I asked, though I already suspected. "Someone sent our ministry documents suggesting you have been misrepresenting Emerald's capabilities and that the company is planning to withdraw from certain commitments in our agreement." "Let me guess. These documents came without a name attached." "Correct. Anonymous, but detailed, including financial projections that appear legitimate." "They're falsified," I said firmly. "Just like the reports Preston altered. This is an attempt to undermine our partnership." "I suspected as much, which is why I'm calling you directly. But the ministry is concerned. We've invested significantly based on your recommendations." "I understand. Can you forward me these documents? I'll prove they're fabricated." After we hung up, I sat in my darkened apartment, the city lights creating patterns across my living room floor. So this was Landon's play, not just to discredit me internally, but to destroy the very partnership that had elevated me. He was willing to sabotage a multi-million-dollar deal just to prove I didn't belong. The documents arrived in my email 10 minutes later. As I reviewed them, my anger turned to cold determination. The projections were clever forgeries, close enough to our actual numbers to seem plausible, but manipulated to show gradual failure of the initiative I was leading. I immediately called our finance director, Ellis, who I knew would still be working late. "I need you to verify something for me," I said when he answered. "Someone has falsified financial projections and sent them to our Saudi partners." "Send them over," he said without hesitation. Ellis was one of the good ones, a brilliant financial mind who judged people solely on their competence. 20 minutes later, he called back. "These are definitely fake. Whoever did this had access to our actual projections but modified key variables to show declining returns. It's subtle but undeniable. Can you document the discrepancies? I need irrefutable proof." "Already working on it. I'll have it to you by morning." "Thank you, Ellis." "Aaliyah," he said before hanging up, "whoever did this is playing with fire. This could constitute fraud." "I know exactly who did it," I replied. "And tomorrow, he's going to learn what happens when you play with fire." The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I needed time to prepare. Ellis had sent his analysis at 2 a.m., a meticulous breakdown of the falsified projections with clear evidence of manipulation. I printed copies and placed them in folders, then sent a message to Chairman Griffith requesting an emergency meeting with the executive team. "Matter of urgent importance regarding our Saudi partnership," I wrote. "All leadership required." The meeting was set for 10 a.m. As executives filed into the conference room, I noticed Landon's confident stride. He thought he was winning. He had no idea what was coming. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," I began once everyone was seated. "Yesterday evening, I received disturbing information. Someone from Emerald sent falsified financial projections to our Saudi partners, suggesting our joint initiative is failing." Murmurs of concern filled the room. Landon's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Fortunately," I continued, "Sheikh Tarek contacted me directly to verify the information. Our finance team has confirmed these projections are forgeries. I distributed the folders. The evidence is before you." As the executives reviewed Ellis's analysis, the atmosphere in the room darkened. "This is a serious breach," Chairman Griffith said. "If our partners had believed these projections, we could have lost the entire contract." "Exactly," I agreed. "And I believe I know who's responsible." All eyes turned to me. This was the moment of truth. For months, there has been a systematic attempt to undermine both this partnership and my position. First, with altered reports, now with falsified projections. The pattern is clear. I looked directly at Landon. "Would you like to explain yourself, or shall I continue?" His face drained of color. "You're accusing me? Based on what evidence?" "The documents were sent from an anonymous email account," I said, "but they were created on a company computer." Ellis traced the digital signature. "Would you like to guess whose computer it was?" Landon's eyes darted around the room looking for allies, finding none. "This is absurd. I've been nothing but supportive of our international initiatives." While simultaneously meeting with board members off-site to raise concerns about foreign influence, I asked, while attempting to frame me as having divided loyalties. Chairman Griffith turned to Landon. "Is this true? Have you been lobbying against Aaliyah behind the board's back?" Landon straightened his tie, buying time. "I've expressed legitimate concerns about potential conflicts of interest. That's my job as division head." "And the falsified projections?" I pressed. "Were those also part of your job?" "I had nothing to do with any falsified documents," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. I slid a final piece of paper across the table to Chairman Griffith. "This is an IT report showing that the documents were created on Landon's company laptop at 7:43 p.m. last Tuesday. He then transferred them to a flash drive, presumably to send from an untraceable account." The room fell silent. Landon's face contorted with rage and desperation. "You set me up," he hissed. "You planted those files." That would be quite a feat, I replied calmly, considering I was in a video conference with the ministry at that exact time. 20 people can verify my whereabouts. Chairman Griffith stood. Landon, please wait in my office. The rest of you are dismissed except for Aaliyah. As the room cleared, I remained seated, my heart pounding despite my outward calm. Once we were alone, Chairman Griffith sat heavily in the chair next to mine. You've been anticipating this, he said. It wasn't a question. I've been documenting patterns of behavior since I started at this company, I corrected. Self-preservation becomes instinct when you're constantly undermined. He nodded slowly. What do you want to happen now? An interesting question. Not what would happen to Landon, but what I wanted. The chairman was giving me power over Landon's fate. If you've ever wondered what true revenge feels like, it's not the hot rush of anger. It's not watching someone suffer. It's this moment when the person who tried to diminish you is suddenly at your mercy, when you get to decide what justice looks like. I considered the question carefully. The simplest answer would be to demand Landon's termination. He had committed corporate espionage, attempted to sabotage a major partnership, and systematically undermined me and other women. By any standard, these were fireable offenses. But firing him would be too easy, too clean. It would remove the problem without addressing the system that created him. I want structural change, I said finally. Landon should face consequences, yes, but firing him just creates a vacancy that could be filled by someone with the same attitudes. Chairman Griffith leaned forward, intrigued. What exactly are you proposing? First, Landon steps down as division head, effective immediately. He nodded. Given the evidence, that's inevitable. Second, we restructure leadership across all divisions. Every team must have diverse representation, not just in numbers, but in actual decision-making authority. That's more challenging, but doable. Third, we implement transparent pay structures and promotion criteria. No more subjective evaluations that favor those who look and think like the existing leadership. He winced slightly at this one. The board will push back. Let them. Fourth, we expand the scholarship foundation to include mentorship programs and guaranteed internships. We don't just bring diverse talent in, we make sure they can succeed. And Landon specifically? He asked. Here was the real question. What did I want for the man who had tried so hard to diminish me? Landon stays with the company, I said, surprising even myself. But he reports to me, and he becomes the executive sponsor of our diversity initiatives. Chairman Griffith's eyebrows shot up. You want him to champion the very changes he's been resisting? Exactly. His redemption, if he chooses it, will be to actively dismantle the system he benefited from. He'll learn what it means to advocate for those with less power. Or he'll resign rather than do so, which will be its own statement. A slow smile spread across the chairman's face. That's elegantly brutal. It's not about brutality, I corrected. It's about transformation. Landon isn't the disease, he's a symptom. I want to treat the underlying condition. Chairman Griffith stood and extended his hand. I'll take your proposal to the board this afternoon. Given the alternatives, losing our Saudi partnership or facing potential fraud charges, I think they'll be receptive. As I shook his hand, I felt no triumph, no vindictive pleasure, just a quiet certainty that this was the right path forward. Later that day, I sat in my office waiting for the board's decision when there was a knock at my door. To my surprise, it was Landon. His usual polished appearance had crumbled. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. The armor of confidence he typically wore had cracked, revealing the frightened man beneath. May I come in? He asked, his voice lacking its usual authoritative edge. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat, avoiding my eyes. The chairman told me your proposal, he said after a long silence. Why? Why what? Why not just have me fired? That's what I would have done in your position. I know, I replied simply. That's the difference between us. He looked up, confusion evident in his expression. I don't understand. You see power as something to be hoarded and protected. I see it as something to be distributed and shared. That's naive, he scoffed, a hint of his old arrogance returning. Business isn't about sharing power. And how has your approach worked out for you? I asked. Here you sit, demoted, disgraced, at the mercy of someone you tried to destroy. Was it worth it? He flinched as if I'd struck him. You have no idea what it's like to… To what? To work twice as hard for half the recognition? To have your ideas stolen? To be undermined at every turn? You're right. I have no idea what that's like. My voice remained calm, but the words landed precisely. Landon fell silent, unable to meet my gaze. You have a choice now, I continued. You can resign and find another company where you can continue your old patterns. Or you can stay and be part of something better. Something that will outlast both of us. And if I stay, you'll use this position to humiliate me. No, I'll expect you to do your job, championing diversity and inclusion initiatives with the same energy you once used to undermine them. Your success will be measured by the success of others, particularly those who don't look like you. He shook his head slowly. I don't know if I can do that. Then you've already made your choice, I said, turning back to my computer, dismissing him. But he didn't rise to leave. Instead, he sat there, seemingly wrestling with himself. What if? He began, then stopped. Started again. What if I don't know how? The vulnerability in the question surprised me. I looked at him more carefully and saw something I hadn't expected. Not just fear of losing status, but genuine uncertainty. Then you learn, I said, my tone softening slightly. You listen more than you speak. You recognize that your experience isn't universal. You use your privilege to create space for others rather than to claim more for yourself. He nodded slowly. I need to think. Take the weekend, I said. Let me know your decision on Monday. After he left, I exhaled deeply, releasing tension I hadn't realized I was holding. Whatever Landon decided, things were already changing. The board approved all my proposals that afternoon, with only 2 dissenting votes. The restructuring would begin immediately. On Monday morning, I arrived to find Landon waiting outside my office, impeccably dressed and holding a thick folder. I'm staying, he said without preamble, and I spent the weekend researching best practices for corporate diversity initiatives. These are my initial thoughts. He held out the folder. I took it, not bothering to hide my surprise. This doesn't mean I've suddenly changed who I am, he added quickly, but I'm willing to learn. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a transformation, but it was a beginning. Over the next few months, Emerald Energy Solutions became a case study in corporate evolution. The restructuring created opportunities for overlooked talent to rise. The transparent promotion criteria eliminated much of the subjective decision-making that had disadvantaged women and minorities. The mentorship programs connected promising students with leaders across the industry. And Landon? He surprised everyone, including himself. Once he redirected his ambition toward measurable diversity goals, he applied the same relentless drive that had fueled his rise. He wasn't perfect. He still stumbled, still had blind spots. But he was trying, genuinely trying, to understand perspectives different from his own. 6 months after our confrontation, we launched a major initiative together, a partnership with 5 universities to create renewable energy programs with diverse faculty and student bodies. As we stood on stage at the announcement, a reporter asked Landon how it felt to champion such progressive programs. It's been educational, he said, with unexpected candor. I've had to unlearn as much as I've had to learn, but the results speak for themselves. Our teams are stronger, more innovative, and more successful than ever before. Later, at the reception, he approached me with 2 glasses of sparkling water. The Sheikh just told me our partnership is expanding to 3 additional countries, he said, handing me a glass. He specifically mentioned your leadership as the deciding factor. The whole team deserves credit, I replied. Yes, but it wouldn't have happened without you. He hesitated, then added, I wouldn't be here without you either. Planning to thank me for not destroying your career? I asked, only half joking. No, he said seriously. I'm acknowledging that you saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. The capacity to change. I studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity. Found none. Everyone has that capacity, I said. Few choose to use it. Why did you choose to change things rather than just advance yourself? The question made me think of my grandmother, of my mother, of all the women who had come before me, creating paths where none existed. Because success means nothing if you're the only one who achieves it, I said finally. Real victory isn't reaching the top alone. It's bringing others with you, especially those who've been kept from even approaching the ladder. A year after the confrontation with Landon, I received a call from Sheikh Tariq. Vice Minister, he greeted me warmly. I have a proposition for you. He explained that the ministry was creating a new international consortium focused on renewable energy implementation in developing nations. They wanted me to lead it. The position would require you to leave Emerald, he said, but your impact would be global. I looked around my office at Emerald. So much had changed. The company now regularly appeared on lists of best workplaces for women and minorities. The Scholarship Foundation had supported 50 young women entering engineering programs. Our executive team had achieved gender parity. My work here wasn't finished. Meaningful change never is, but the momentum was established. Systems were in place to continue progress. Perhaps it was time for a new challenge. I accepted Sheikh Tariq's offer, with one condition, that Emerald would be a founding partner in the consortium. My worlds would remain connected, the bridge I had built remaining intact. When I announced my departure, the response was bittersweet, celebration of my opportunity mixed with genuine regret at my leaving. The company organized a farewell reception that was attended by everyone from board members to maintenance staff. Imani, now a senior director, hugged me tightly. You changed everything, she whispered. We won't go back to the way it was. Make sure of it, I replied. The work continues, with or without me. As I made my rounds, saying goodbyes, I found Landon standing near the windows, looking out at the city. So, he said as I approached, you're leaving us behind. Not behind, I corrected. Alongside, the consortium will work closely with Emerald. He nodded, then turned to face me fully. I never properly thanked you. For what? For not doing to me what I would have done to you. For seeing possibility instead of just punishment. Don't make me regret it, I said, but I was smiling. I won't. He extended his hand. Good luck, Vice Minister. As I shook his hand, I realized how far we'd both come from that moment when he'd whispered, women like you belong in reception. He had been wrong about me, about women, about leadership. And he had learned from his wrongness, perhaps the most valuable skill anyone can develop. My last day at Emerald, I cleared out my office and took a final walk through the building. In the lobby, I paused to look at the newly installed wall recognizing the scholarship recipients, dozens of young women who would shape the future of renewable energy. My grandmother's name was inscribed above them all, honoring her sacrifice and vision. As I stepped outside into the bright Chicago day, I felt no regret, no unfinished business. My revenge hadn't been destroying Landon or even humiliating him. It had been creating a world where future generations of women wouldn't need revenge at all, where their talents would be recognized, their voices heard, their leadership valued. The true victory wasn't in tearing down, but in building up, not in closing doors, but in opening them wider than they'd ever been before. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you don't belong, remember this. Your response doesn't have to be destruction. It can be creation. You can build something so undeniably valuable that those who dismissed you must either adapt or be left behind. That's not just revenge, it's revolution. And it starts with refusing to be invisible. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like and subscribe. There are so many more stories of transformation waiting to be told, of people who turned obstacles into opportunities, who refused to accept the limitations others placed on them. Your support ensures these stories reach those who need to hear them most. And remember, the most powerful response to being underestimated isn't anger, it's excellence.